Hi again, everybody. It's Josh Pierce again at _JPierce on Instagram, and I've got a pretty cool new tutorial for you guys. It's a little bit different. We're eventually going to be getting to this image. We have this misty wood scene with a statue of the Buddha in here, and there's all this beautiful water and rocks and trees and nice early morning type misty composition. So we're going to be getting to doing a image walkthrough on this image, but first I want to show you a little bit about where this model came from. And so I want to start by saying there's a new app, and the app is called Display.Land, and this is their site. And I don't normally do this kind of thing, but the folks at Display.Land reached out to me to do a sponsored post and tutorial about their app, and I thought it was so cool that I said, yeah, I'll totally do this. Basically, the app allows you to do photo scanning and photogrammetry all on your phone, all on the back end, without having to do any image series or collecting it or using another piece of software to solve the mesh and do all the retopoing and everything that goes into making a good quality scan. And this does it all on your phone, and once you're done scanning, you just hit send. It processes it on the back end, and then you're able to come in and crop out, so here's the point cloud, and then you're able to crop out certain areas, and then depending on what you want to do with it, you can add little 3D objects, make little scenes, and they've done a good job of making it sort of social app that you can share these little scenes with people. Though what I'm more interested in is the ability to take a lot of the pain out of the photogrammetry process, because I don't really have any experience doing it. I see what other people create. I'm able to use those models to create things, but I haven't delved into being able to create these things by myself. So this if you go to get.display.land, you'll be able to download and check it out. I'll put a link up for that. I went out and just outside my office went and scanned this little dumpster thing that was sitting out there, and this is my first time opening up the app, and I got something that was pretty much usable off the bat, as a element that you can pop into a scene. And that doesn't this doesn't seem like it's that exciting, but if you know some of my work, you might be able to envision a dumpster like that. I have a dumpster in this image here in this post-apocalyptic style image that I created, that sort of is kind of a concept art type of image. And this was for a series I did called Postopia. And so I'm really excited to test drive this thing, go out and shoot some kind of cars, maybe something like this, old trucks. The possibilities are really endless when it comes to photogrammetry, because you get to just go out in the world, and anything you see you can turn into a 3D model. And to me, that's really exciting. So I was able to take my scan here and bring it into Cinema, and I mean, this is the first time I've used this app, and already I've got basically a usable model. And you can see there's there's high, the mesh is high enough, but it's not way too big. I didn't do anything to this. I just brought it in to Cinema and hit render in Octane and put a daylight in there, and that's it. So I'm really excited about this. I hope you guys go check out the app. We'll get into the image now. This is the image I'm going to be working with. The folks at Display.Land sent over a scan that was created by a guy named Vale, user named Vale, at Vale on this on the Display.Land app, and he went out and took this really nice scan of this Buddha. So the guys at Display.Land sent me this OBJ mesh, and so that's where we got started. So I have it brought into Cinema already, and you know, pretty much right out of the gate, you can see it's a pretty nice looking model. And what's cool about the app too is that there's a little progress bar that as you're walking around with your camera scanning your object, it tells you what's the minimum and what's the maximum amount of data it's collecting. Obviously on my little dumpster scan, I stopped when it hit minimum. I had walked around that little dumpster just 2 times, 5 minutes. I'm sure this user spent a little bit more time, probably spent about 15 to 20 minutes circling around and around the sculpture to get every detail, and you can get pretty close up to this thing, and it holds up pretty well, and the topology looks like what I'm used to working with scanned objects. So a really cool app. I hope you guys go check it out. I want to thank them for reaching out to me and offering to sponsor this post. So here's our image again that we're going to work with, and I created this using their Buddha. So we're going to start with this terrain here, and then we'll go in and fill in the plants, and yeah, so here we go. Alright, so here's what we're going to do. The first thing that we really need to do is just kind of hide this guy while I set up the terrain. So I'm going to start with a plane. I like to make my planes 4,000 by 4,000 with 200 by 200 segments, and then I will break it apart and go in with some sculpting brushes, and I want to create a little creek that kind of divides and then rejoins, so that our statue's sitting on top of a little island right here. And if you've watched my previous tutorials, I'm going to start with the sculpting brush, the pull brush, and I'm going to hold Control to create an indentation. So I'm going to create an indentation and start drawing our stream. Looks like the pressure is a little low, so holding the middle mouse button, you can increase the pressure by holding the middle mouse button, moving the mouse up and down. So I'm going to hold Control and start sculpting our little creek. So there's our bend, and we'll make it go off into the distance, and then we'll join this section here and create a little island. And that'll probably work fine right there. And then I want to raise up some of these other areas just to give it some more definition. Very simple terrain. Just a little creek in the woods early in the morning. Beautiful sculpture. Maybe a little bit of breeze going through the trees, and sound of the insects. So I'm going to come in and bring my camera into around here. I'm going to bring in a daylight so that I can get a better idea of what our terrain looks like. So I want my light, to be off in this area over here, and I want my black bars on. So I hit Shift V, and in the tinted border opacity, I'm going to set that to 90. Well, let's go with 80. so that now in my live viewer I can see where my image is going to live. And maybe I'm not super happy with how this looks, so I can go in and adjust my brush size and strength and just do a little bit more adjusting. And you know, maybe we can just wait until we've got our texture on here to really worry about too many changes to how the terrain looks. So I'm going to use RD Textures. I'll give a link to their site as well to create the ground. I'm going to use this one, RD Rock Ground 7. This one, RD Rock Ground 7, Real Displacement Textures. And just going to apply it to my ground, and we'll open up the node editor and dock it up here and make sure that we are using follow smooth normal. And we're going to need a bunch more tiles, so we'll try 8 by 8. And that looks okay, but maybe it's too many. Maybe we only want maybe 6 by 6. Maybe too many still. 4 by 4. That looks pretty good. That looks pretty good, but I think I want to flatten these areas out a little. So I'm just going to use a very light flattened brush and kind of just smooth this out because it got a little too deep. So make sure our island is still here, and it's looking pretty nice. Pretty nice ground in there already, and maybe we need to also increase the height on our displacement. So go up to 80, maybe 120. Let's leave it at 80, and maybe I have too many tiles still. Go 3 by 3. I think I like the look of that a bit better. Now what we're going to do is go in and start adding some plants in, and the best way to do that is to go to Forester, Multiflora. We're using the Forester plugin from 3D Quakers, and I'm going to add a Forester Multiflora, and then in the Octane menu I'm going to add an Octane scatter, and then I'm going to add 2 effectors, a plane effector and a random effector. And I'm going to add the Multiflora into the Octane scatter, and I will go ahead and select the type of grass that I want here. And I think what I want is this Poa grass, but I want to turn off change materials. So we're going to go with this Poa grass, and I have in here in my material library I have a preset for greenery, so we're going to bring in our greenery texture. And you know what, before I do this, I'm going to also bring in, I have a preset for a water texture, and I'll show you what that looks like here. Just very simple. It's a specular material with a noise and a scattering medium. And I'm going to bring in the water first, just so I can get an idea of where I want my creek to be. And I usually use a disk object for my creek, so I just drop a disk in and then drag it out so that it's covering my whole scene, and then adjusting the height so that I can see where my water line is. And so if we say it's there, and we'll apply our water texture to our disk. If we say it's right there, now I can go ahead and make some adjustments to my mesh. So I'm going to use the pool brush on a pretty light pressure and push down a little here. Bring this up some. And if you're having trouble seeing where you're working, you can go to your water object, which is the disk, and check X-rayed under the basic tab, so that now I can see through it in my viewport. So going back to our plane, which is our ground, let's label this ground, and this is our statue. Statue, did I spell that right? Oh, I didn't even spell ground right. Well, you know, I'm not a writer, so you can complain in the comments. So we're going to make some adjustments here. That's a little high, and just kind of smooth this out, and you can artistically you know, shape this water and these islands however you like. I like to use the flatten brush to kind of just make this feel a little more natural in certain areas. And it's not going to matter all too much because we're going to be covering this with plants and our statue, and there'll be trees everywhere. But you want to have a nice baseline so that everything meshes together well. So this is a cool looking forest with our creek and everything happening in here. And so now we'll go to our scatter and apply our ground to the distribution of the Octane scatter. And we want this set on surface. And we want to apply our greenery texture to our grass. And the greenery texture is simply an image from the Forester library, and I have it, I'm multiplying in some extra color, and I'm applying that to albedo, specular, and transmission of a universal style material. Now you can see that there's plants underneath the water, so what I have done traditionally is use this plane effector, and if you're using R20 and above, you're going to need to use a plane field effector. In the fall off, you need to use our linear field, I think it's called. But in R19, which I'm still using here on my personal machine, all you have to do is set a fall off to linear and Y plus, and then I'll set it as a child to my water object and reset the PSR so that it's exactly on the center. And I'll set the size of the fall off to 5, the orientation to Y plus, and then the parameters I want to be the scale, -1. So now, and of course I have to actually apply it to the scatter, and I'm going to apply the random to the scatter while we're at it. And so now whatever's below the water line, the plants, they get cut off. And as far as our random effector is concerned, I just want to add some random rotation of 900 so that we get some extra variation. Now I'm going to group all these things together and just call this plant. So we have a plant layer object because we're going to be creating several layers of plants. So this is our first, and we're going to go ahead and increase the count to maybe 10 times that. Probably too much there, so maybe 5,000. That's a good start, and maybe we want some extra distance here. So by moving the plane effector up and down, I can control where the plants are interacting with the bank of the water. So if I lift it up just a little bit, we get some clearance. And so I'm going to create a series of plants in here. I have a POA, and let's see, let's try this wheat. That's kind of cool looking, so we'll use the wheat, and we'll make it a bit smaller just to give it some variation in there. and then we'll take another plant, and I like to use this leaf grass, and that's, probably can't see it because it's maybe a little small, and now we can adjust the count again, go up to 7,000, and we've got some good coverage, good looking plants in here. And another thing that I did was I wanted to make this water, I'm going to go ahead and adjust this water. I don't want this bright blue weird looking water, so I'm going to make it sort of a muddier color, nice and dark, and then increase the density of the scattering medium so that we get this nice dark water. Now it's reflecting the blue sky, so it still looks blue, but once we go in and fill it all in, you're going to be able to see that, I want to be able to see a little bit in there. So that's looking pretty good. I'm going to now actually add a sky, and what I want to do with my Octane daylight is say mix sky texture, and then I want to go in, and I'm using a series of HDRIs from nomotionhdri.net, and there's just a whole bunch of them in here that I like, and when you mix together an HDRI with a sunlight, you get a lot more control, you get a lot more natural looking scene, and it all just comes together so much more nicely. So I'm going to rotate my HDRI around this way, and now we're starting to get this sort of early morning look that I'm going for, this sort of misty morning, and it's looking pretty good. It's looking pretty great already. Maybe we'll come in, adjust our light a little bit more, but this is the base, and now we can bring our statue back in. So get him in position, and then we will really be able to work with the lighting. Looks like he's facing the wrong way, so spin him around and get him just set right here on our little island. Now what I did was I just tucked the model down into my mesh like that, so that I didn't have to deal with the extra pieces that are on the scan, and that works fine. Definitely works fine for our purposes, and you can see the lighting now. He's a bit dark on this side, so I'm going to go ahead, and what I like to do is once I drop in a camera, this is a little trick of mine, we'll go in, let's get our framing a little bit better. We need to be a bit closer to him, something like there. I like to take my camera and use that as a target for an Octane target light, targeted area light. And what that lets me do is kind of just position these lights as if they're side fills, and it gets a nice edge here because I'm just sort of glancing off of the side of it. Rather than making the target be my object, I actually want it to be the camera, so I get some nice fill in on the side here. And then I'll go ahead and duplicate this, put one more up above, and you get that nice edge lighting around our model. And maybe this needs to go up a little bit higher here. And then I like to adjust the temperature of these and make them something a little more natural in this yellow region, somewhere around 4,500. And yeah, now we're starting to get really a very nice look, and just a matter of filling it in now with our additional plants. So we already have this plant group, so I can just copy it. And I'm going to delete what's in my scatter here, and we're going to go back to the Forester plugin and grab a tree. And the tree that I'm using here is, you know, my standard favorite. Wow, there's way too many. Oh my god. Thank you, computer, for being very fast, because otherwise, if I had done this on a lesser machine, it may have crashed. So grateful to have a very powerful workstation here that I'm working on. So 200, probably too many, maybe just 50. And I want to reduce the normal align so that we get them upright. Now the tree I want to use here is going to be my favorite eucalyptus tree. And what I'm going to do with this tree is increase the viewport levels to 4 so that I can see the leaves. And then I want to increase the trunk height. Under trunk parameters, there's a TR height, that's the trunk height. I'm just going to increase it up a bunch. And then in my branch levels, I don't need so many branches, maybe only half of that. Go down to 7. And I'm going to go ahead and apply my greenery texture to my tree leaves. And what's wonderful about this texture is it has this transmission in it, and you're not going to be able to see the effect of that unless you're in path tracing. So now you can see that there is some light passing through the leaves. Our lighting is getting totally jacked up by our Octane scatter, and that's fine for right now. But I just wanted to show you that. And when we go into path tracing, I like to set my max samples to 350, and then I want to set the GI clamp to 4. And that's just going to help everything move along a lot faster, keep everything from getting too crazy. So the way these trees are, I've got way too many of them, I think, maybe. So at this point, I want to kind of just move into more of an artistic mode and start playing around with these things. So, and we'll just adjust the seed of our scatter, see what we can do. And we've already set up a little bit of the lighting, but it's pretty clear that he's too dark. So I'm going to go ahead and select the statue and select an Octane targeted area light and go ahead and light him, give him some fill because he's too dark. So we'll adjust the temperature down and we'll adjust the power down. And then as I'm doing lighting, I like to toggle these things on and off, so I get a before and an after. And now some of the gold is coming through a bit better. And we're still getting that edge light that I liked before. So that's nice. And let's go ahead and duplicate our plants again. And this time I'm going to go to the library and I'm gonna select, I think, this Albizia tree, which is a wonderful tree. And we'll take it up to 4 on the viewport levels, and it's too big, so we'll shrink it down some. And now it's cloning right on top of my other tree, so I have to change the seed. And when I do this, what you can see is that they're kind of bulky and they're not really the shape I want them to be, so I'm going to go in and reshape these. And the way this tree works is it's all branches, so everything happens in branch level 1. And what I want to do is I want to straighten it out, sort of make it less of a bush and more of a tree. So I'm going to reduce the spread angle on the branches. And now it's coming in and looking a little bit more like a tree. And the bend on the branches, I'm going to reduce that down to. And now just the total number of branches, cut that about in half. And now you can see we've got just sort of a tufted looking branch, and we're going to go ahead and start playing with this seed some more and see if we can get something that we kind of like. And I think what's happening here is there's this up, and then I want it to be filled out in here. I don't want it to be so much like that. So on branch level 2, that's the second branch coming out, this prune parent determines how far up this branch the next branch comes out. So if I pull this down, it's going to come down, and now I have sort of what looks like a woodsy, jungly plant filling in around here. So we'll go up to maybe 25 of these guys, and maybe I can pull down my plane some for this one. Okay, I'm okay with this, but obviously the seed is now needs to be changed. And that looks pretty cool. It might not be the final version, but I'm okay with how it is right now. And now you can see as we're filling this in, what we're going to do is fill in the background, because it looks like we're at the edge of a cliff right now, and I want us to be in the woods. So all I'm doing is taking a regular landscape object, just sliding it back in space, just sticking it back here somewhere. And it doesn't have to be anything perfect, it just needs to be a surface, so that now you can see that there's something back there. And I'm going to use the same ground texture. I'm just going to duplicate it from our ground by holding Control and dragging the texture tag so that it has some texture on it. It's not just a white blob back there. And duplicate again our plants layer. And this time I'm going to also duplicate in this eucalyptus tree. And now I have to apply the landscape to the Octane scatter. And for now, I'm going to turn off our front plants so that I can see what our background layer is doing. And what I want is probably more. We'll go up to maybe 65. And the tree is too large. This tree, actually this tree is probably fine. This tree is too small. And we don't want it to cast a big ugly shadow over everything either. So we want to be careful with it. Maybe something like that is good, and maybe we just need a few more, maybe up to 80, 120. That's too many. 80 was fine. So this will probably work okay. Let's turn our others back on. And now we're sitting nicely here in the woods. And I want to duplicate this light so that we get some interaction with the light and the plants. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add some more of these albizia trees, and I'm gonna do that just by creating an instance and turning on render instance. And then I'm going to take this tree and bring it up here close to the camera. And you can be very very artistic with how you want this to look. And just holding Control and dragging to create another copy of it. So now we've got kind of a number of plants just hanging out in the foreground, and it all looks very nice. And now I'm going to go ahead and add a fog volume. And the first thing that you do when you add a fog volume is you change this voxel size to at least 900. Then I'm going to go with full white on the scattering and full white on the absorption, or the absorption and scattering. I guess I had them backwards. But now I can just use the little handles and drag this thing out to be whatever size I need this thing to be. Let's see. Not letting me grab that handle. Come on. So I usually want my my volume object to be somewhere in this area. So my statue's here, my camera's here, my statue's here. This is my main forest area, this is my background forest area. So I want it to live somewhere in there. So you can see that's the edge, and it's blotting everything out, which is fine, because now we're just going to take the density slider and bring it down. And now we're starting to get the mist. It helps to bring definition into really what's in the foreground, being our statue, and what's in the background. And we're going to increase the scattering a little bit to give it some more brightness. And we can even add some color to the scattering and absorption channels. So if I go with blue, now you can see that there's this nice sort of misty morning feel happening to this image. And these are all the techniques that I used. And now you can see that our water is kind of getting lost, and this is what I was talking about before. So if I go to the scattering medium node in my water object, I can start adjusting this density just like the volume object density, and you can see our water starts to really fill in, and you get those reflections, and there's a lot more definition in the water, and now we've got what looks to be like a very cool looking scene. And what's great about all these techniques is it's all non-destructive, so I can go in and adjust the ground again just by using a pool brush again. And let me say that I want a little bit more ground right here. Fine, no problem. It even fills in the plants where the plants are supposed to be, because now I'm going to add one more layer of plants, and this is going to be, let me adjust this first. We'll go down to 200. Whoops, I lost it. So I'm going to do one more layer of plants. This is plants 4, and what I want to add in is some flowers. So I like to use these guys down here. We're going to use this. Rose is red, violets are blue, something 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 something. So I'm going to duplicate my greenery material, and this time all I really need to do is just pipe this RGB spectrum to the albedo and to the transmission, and I want it to be a yellowy orange for our petals, and then I just apply that onto our roses and set the selection to PETAL, petal, and I think it needs to be before this. And now you can see there's a few flowers in here, and perhaps I need to adjust my plane effector
and maybe I need a few more. We'll go with 800. Okay, there they are. So they're too big, and we'll go ahead and just go to the multi-flora size and start scaling them down. Great. And some coming out of the water, so we don't want that. And just like everything else, I can go in and adjust this seed if I want to see, maybe have some more here on this bank. And get a nice even distribution. So we have this beautiful spring morning happening. And I'm going to show you how you get from here, which is already looks really nice, to our final image, and we're going to do some of that in After Effects. So I'll see you in After Effects. Okay, so that's finished rendering, and here I am in After Effects. And a lot of people ask me why I use After Effects instead of Photoshop, and you know, it's just a preference. I think that I know a lot about Photoshop. I'm totally capable in Photoshop. I think for me, coming from a motion graphics background, I think it's just easier to composite together several different 3D passes. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make my Z depth pass into a new layer, into a new composition, and then I'm going to add a new solid in the background and make it white, just to make sure there's no extra space back there. So you know, in After Effects, you know, I have a you know, I have a base pass, a denoiser pass, and a Z depth pass. And if I decided, like, oh, there's something here and I need to move this over 10 pixels, all I have to do is press re-render, overwrite the files, and it all updates. Whereas, you know, in Photoshop, you know, then you have to drag in each layer again and make sure everything's positioned correctly. And it's just more of a headache. And if I want to animate these things, you know, everything's here to be animated, ready to go. So, you know, I think ease of use of various render passes makes it easier for me to work in After Effects. So what I usually do with these fog layers is, like I said, I pre-compose the Z depth pass, and then I just drag it in on top. And I use a free plugin called Null Unmold. If you Google around, you can find it. It's super helpful. It's basically a screen pass without adding any brightness. It sucks out all the blacks. So now I just have this, and I'm going to add a mask to it and feather out this mask quite a bit. My image size is 3200 by 4000, so the mask feathers are pretty large. And then all I'm going to do is just add a tint to this. I'm going to do color correction tint and grab something in this area, and so maybe a little more green. And that's going to give us this nice looking misty morning look to it, and that's really cool. And yeah, so very simple stuff, but I like to add a little bit of vignetting, you know, to everything. Just with a really simple, you know, really simple black solid with a mask. Just a little bit of vignetting to add some extra life to it. and then from there, some color correction and whatnot. I'll show you another little trick. I'm going to create some God rays in here, some fake God rays. I say fake because I didn't render them with in my original image. I didn't render these with the Octane scattering object. I just added them in post. So to do that, I just create a new solid and use my favorite Andrew Kramer hashtag Andrew Kramer plugin, Fractal Noise. So boost up the complexity and go into the transform, uncheck uniform scaling, jack up the scale so I get this nice streaky effect, and just take a mask, draw it around here, feather it out, and change the blending mode to screen, feather it out some more, and then I'm going to adjust these contrast settings, so a bit more contrast, a little less brightness. Cool. And now I'm just going to select the layer, press W, rotate it, press V, bring it up here, and now I'm going to use my Z depth pass again and set the track matte mode to Luma matte, and it's going to set it back in here a little bit, and if it's too much I can adjust the well, I can't adjust the opacity, but what I can do is use a curves on my Z depth pass and bring it up to help bring out these streaks a little more. Very nice God rays. And now this obviously gives me a ton more control, so I can tweak this mask around. Maybe there's just a little too much right there. Very nice looking God rays. And what we can do from there is add another tint and give it something in a yellow, maybe, or in a green. I think I went with this sort of orangey yellow in here. So very nice looking. And now I'm going to just add an adjustment layer, effect, do levels, and now we can start dialing this in. Beautiful. So that's pretty much it. That is the long and short of the creation of this image. And I hope you guys learned something. Please go and make sure you check out the Display.Land app and go out and do some 3D scanning. Bring those models in and upload what you made. I'd be really interested to see what you guys make from the things you learned in this tutorial, and hope to see you again soon. Thanks a lot. Bye.